Okay, some breaking news. As of the latest report by the Federal Reserve, earlier today we learned that SoFi is now the 80th largest commercial bank in the United States. This, along with another piece of news earlier today, is the reason why we're doing this video. Very bullish news, in fact, and I just wanted to share some thoughts on it very quickly. Okay, so this video is being recorded at 1 a.m. It's probably going to be posted tomorrow morning by the time you hear about it, and it's going to be fairly ad hoc where I'm sharing some thoughts. I normally do the weekly recap at the end of the week, but I wanted to share some news around today specifically because it was a big news day for SoFi. Now, I've reported in the past around these commercial bank standings in terms of how big or small the SoFi is by this measure, and the reason why this is important and why I keep reporting on it is because of Anthony Noto's ambitions to become a top 10 financial institution. This is a mantra that he has consistently repeated in numerous interviews, in earnings calls, and this is reinforced by the fact that SoFi is climbing through these rankings fairly quickly. And I'll show you exactly by how much in just a second. Okay, so starting off, I'm doing a live sharing here. This is not a scripted video. Like I said, I just wanted to share some thoughts. SoFi breaks into the 80th largest bank as of the September 30th filing per the Federal Reserve's largest commercial banks list. We're going to go into this filing specifically. We're going to talk about this. This is going to be the majority of this video. But before I go into that, I wanted to cover the other piece of news that just broke earlier today. And that news was, of course, the fact that Anthony Noto is buying the stock. Earlier today, he bought another 22,500 shares worth about $150,000. This is coming off the back of his purchase last week. I believe that was 44,000 shares. So, he is seeing an opportunity here. He has been a consistent buyer of the stock anywhere under the $10 range. He's even bought it above the $10 range on the open market consistently. Notoriously, he's bought the stock in the $4 and $5 and $6 range. And people will criticize Anthony Noto for not buying enough, for not buying consistently. But the fact of the matter is, point another CEO that has effectively bought this much stock of their own company on the open market this consistently. Anthony Noto has purchased on the open market. I mean, in 2023 alone, he's been buying like every other week. It was in the summer when the stock was in the $4 range, the $5 range. He's still a consistent buyer of the stock on the open market. And remember, this is somebody who has the majority of his net worth already tied up in SoFi shares. Obviously, he has a vested interest in the company, but the fact that he keeps adding more and more and more, it just speaks to that conviction alone. So this is really encouraging for investors to see because it means that management is seeing the same opportunity. Management is putting their skin in the game and essentially has a level of conviction in their execution and the prospects of their company, just as us regular retail investors. Absolutely fantastic to see by the CEO, Anthony Noto. And one thing I'll say before I leave this page is that usually Anthony Noto purchases in batches. I mentioned this in a video last week when he purchased the 44,000 shares that I expected more purchases to come in the following weeks because usually he'll start purchasing in batches. So probably next week we might even see another purchase from Anthony Noto. It might be smaller. I mean, last week it was 44, this week it was 22, next week, it might be 11,000 shares that he buys, but usually he batches up his purchases of SoFi stock. And one thing I will say is that this does have a material impact on the stock. I mean, the entire stock market was down today, and then somewhere around here, Anthony Noto, the Form 4 came out. It came out before the market even closed. It came out during trading hours, and obviously we saw a surge in the stock. I mean, you could say that it's not a one-to-one relationship, that's not the reason why the stock surged up, but I'd like to believe it is because that pattern was not found in a lot of other companies. Everything was really down today. It was en masse a red day, and SoFi ended the day green, which, I mean, it's keeping up with this trend of being inverse of the market because usually when the market is green, SoFi is red, which is what we've seen over the past couple of days. But I'll definitely take this. And it's definitely something that, I think Anthony Noto is encouraging to many investors to stay strong in the stock and keep on buying. And I think that that's one of the reasons why the stock saw just a little surge today on the back of his purchase. But let's now go into the actual main topic. This is the list of large commercial banks by the Federal Reserve as of September 30th. This is insured U.S. chartered commercial banks that have consolidated assets of $300 million or more, ranked by those assets. So a discrepancy here, because when Anthony Noto made his promise of SoFi becoming a top 10 financial institution, he did so by market cap. This list is by consolidated assets. Naturally, you're going to have JP Morgan at the top, you're going to have Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, so on and so forth, Truist, Goldman Sachs, Capital One, TD Bank, Bank of New York. As we go down, you can see the rankings here. And the further down we go, right there on 80th spot, you can see SoFi Bank with the $21 billion in assets. Now, one thing I posted onto Twitter in August was just this velocity. This is on August 20th when SoFi reported that they were in the 90th spot when they broke into the top 100 and moving from 449 all the way to 114 in a single year, essentially increasing assets by 6x. And as of tonight, I've updated that list where SoFi is now the 80th slot with 21.5 billion in deposits, moving from 449th place all the way to 80th in a very short period of time, just over a year, moving from 2 billion in deposits to 21 billion in deposits. That's a 10x increase in terms of their deposit growth in billions. So this is really encouraging to see. And the question I asked in my last post in August was, where do we see this in a couple of years? The question I'll ask in this video is, where do we see this next year? Because I understand as it gets bigger and bigger, at some point it's going to plateau. I get it. But how much bigger does it get before it plateaus? Like, do we end up in the top 50th slot and then the growth rate starts to fall? Do we end up in the top 30th slot and then the growth rate starts to fall? It's going to start falling eventually, but the deposit number is really what you should be looking out for. The deposit growth for SoFi doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. It's basically a 45-degree line. I'll see if I can overlay a chart onto here. And this is really encouraging to see because it is such a high level of growth in such a short period of time. Again, this is assets. This is how this list is measured, by assets, not necessarily by market cap. So there's a discrepancy there, and there will be. But this is really encouraging to see because SoFi just keeps climbing faster and faster into those rankings. And it's just validating for investors to see, because essentially this number is something that the underlying business controls. The business cannot necessarily control what happens in the stock movement in the short term. The business can't really control the market cap in the short term. There's a lot of psychological aspects. There's emotional trading. There's algorithmic trading. There's a lot of institutional, whether it's FUD, whether it's analysts, whether it's manipulation, if you want to call it that. Essentially, it's out of the company's management's hands. However, what is not out of their hands is their execution ability, which is displayed through metrics like these ones. And that is why it is very bullish if you're looking at the company fundamentals and the company's ability to execute on the targets that they set for themselves. And it increases your confidence level to trust management's promises going forward. That's a promise of profitability that the company management has made for Q4, but it's not limited to that, right? Because as we see SoFi consistently executing, we can increase our confidence of the promises that they made that are more far-fetched, that are more out there, more into the future, of Galileo, for example, becoming the backbone from a tech perspective of all of these major legacy players, right? We can have more faith in that promise as they keep executing. We can have more faith in the promise that Anthony Noto has consistently reiterated this year around SoFi becoming a top 10 financial institution by market cap. Like, I am more confident that that will happen as I see SoFi consistently growing in these rankings, as I see them climbing up, 400 ranking points and 10xing their deposits in general. I become more confident that the company can execute. So really encouraging news in general, and it's encouraging news even in the context of the stock price, especially in the context of the stock price, I think, because as we see the stock price falling, it's very easy to get discouraged in the short term and think, oh, did I miss something with this company? Am I having doubts? What will the macro bring? But the underlying company is consistently executing, and I think that's the underlying message that I want to leave viewers with, is when the underlying company is consistently executing at this degree with this consistency, it really reinvigorates the enthusiasm for the long-term investors to say, okay, well, there might be a disconnect between the stock and the company today, but that disconnect won't exist forever. And at some point, the stock movement will follow in lockstep with the company's execution. And pieces of news like this one validate that even further. For right now, this is the Fundamentals Investing Podcast. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.